And it's good afternoon to Paul Dalligan. Paul, a very special Mother's Day edition of Sportsfan Radio, and we're just particularly looking at round 11 of the NRL today.
Yep, very happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I know my mum was long-suffering while she was with us for my Rabbitohs obsession, but interestingly, during the week, my father got to meet Anthony Albanese where he's residing, so he was there to do a speech, and the first thing he did is march up and said, my son is a long-suffering, tragic Rabbitohs, given that Albanese is on the board of the Rabbitohs. So that was a bit of celebrity there for our panel and extended family.
Did he hand your business card out as well?
No, I don't. I think Albo's all set for legal requirements, but he's put in the hard yards, Albanese, on that Rabbitohs board. We used to be very ordinary.
All right, Paul, the round started on Thursday night with a terrific game, Melbourne Storm and the Broncos. Now, before we get to actually discussing what happened in the game, sin bins, did the ref go mad? Like, there were 4 sin binnings, 3 for the Broncos, which Kevin Walters said that he would like to comment, but he couldn't because his contract wasn't big enough to pay the fine.
Yeah, it's quite sad, and taking nothing away from the Storm, but we'll never know what happened if those sin bins didn't occur. I will say that the Patrick Carrigan one was a debacle, and they've got to have a look at that very quickly. He's trying to tackle a 130-kilogram guy. He hangs on for dear life, and in the process of being twisted around like a sheet in the wind on a Hills hoist, he has to fall somewhere. And because he impacted the legs, I think his armpit hit his leg. They phrased it, they sent him off for a hip drop. Now, the match review panel, who, albeit if they've got more time to look at it, didn't think anything of it. So having a player off the field against a team like the Storm certainly assisted the Storm in getting the win. So they've got to crack down on that, reverse crackdown on the hip drop. They've gone too far, much like they were doing, if you remember, Professor, not long ago with the head high. We're all against head high shots, but they were going way too far with it. And we need to find an equilibrium and fast, because that, I won't say the game was ruined, because it was still a good spectacle, and well done to the Storm who got it done. But the Broncos were severely hampered by what were errors of decisions, because if they were correct decisions, the match review committee would have charged them.
Paul, we've had 5 other games since Thursday night's game, and we've only had 2 sin binnings across the whole of those 5 games. So 4 seems a somewhat unusual number, and especially for a game which I thought was played in good spirits. Normally, if you see that many sin binnings, you would think that there was some dirty play going on, but it wasn't anything like that at all.
No, it wasn't as if it was Storm at Brookvale. It was Storm at Brisbane, and there wasn't, Storm at home. There wasn't the animosity there. The Broncos, though, were very valiant, and they won't lose any fans on the back of that. As you say, it was played in good spirit. It's disappointing if you're a neutral to see that game, because that really cost the Broncos, and they might have run away with it. The biggest thing that happened to the Broncos, though, was Adam Reynolds face planting like a teenage skateboarder in attempting to ground a ball. That's quite concerning, with the pins and needles and being stretchered off. And the fact the Broncos came that close with all that adversity and losing their Napoleon pretty early on shows that they're the real deal.
So Craig Bellamy in his press conference. Yeah, go on, Paul.
You cut it. Yep.
Have you got me?
Yeah, I got you now. Yeah.
Craig Bellamy in his press conference said it was more like an AFL game, too much starting and stopping. Did you see it that way?
And it's rare for Craig Bellamy to come out and admit that his team got lucky and the decision was wrong. He said that Carrigan decision, which I think was the most important one, that it wasn't a hip drop. And if anyone knows hip drops, it's the Storm. It's not a criticism of their style. It's simply the way that they tackle results in a lot of hip drops.
Now, that game, Paul, I'm using as a good litmus test. I've spoken to a couple of other rugby league followers. Because we can make a direct comparison from a fortnight ago when the Storm played the Rabbitohs, and the Rabbitohs cleaned up, basically. yet the Broncos were sitting on top, go and play at the same venue, but are found wanting. Does that show how far the Rabbitohs are in front of the Broncos at the moment?
I think the Rabbitohs are, and I don't want to get carried away or blow any red and green trumpets too loudly, but the Rabbitohs, I tipped them to come first. They're sitting first, but I do want to give credit to the Broncos. I tipped them to come 10th and they're coming second. So they're one of the three teams I didn't tip to make the top 8 who will make the top 8. The Storm, Phil Gould was quite dismissive about their premiership chances on air. Now, we know that the Storm are one of the more resilient teams in the competition. I still think they're a massive chance of winning it all.
I think
they're missing.
I think we can safely say. Yeah, sorry. I think we can safely say those two teams will make the 8, though.
We can, and I did want to say I've got the top 5 right. I think the South, Roosters, Panthers, Melbourne Sharks. I do think the Roosters will make the top 5. The 3 that won't, and apologies, Professor, to ruin your Sunday, but you'd be expecting it. Parramatta, the Dogs, and North Queensland, I'd tip to make the 8. Instead, I think we'll have the Raiders, who have won 5 in a row, the Broncos, who I just mentioned, and also the Dolphins, which would be a real feel-good story. But more than that, I think the coaching nous of Wayne Bennett will get them into the 8.
Paul, I'm not waving the blue and white flags, especially after Friday night's game with the Bulldogs playing the Warriors. 18-0 down at halftime. You can't come back from that against a decent team.
Well, the Warriors have recovered. I haven't got them to make the 8, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do. It's disappointing with the Dogs. Your defence, though, is how many players you're missing. So hopefully next year when you get some more troops in and your current troops back on deck, you're going to be a better squad.
So I think we can put a line through the Bulldogs for this season.
You can. And as I said, I'm putting a line through Parramatta and North Queensland making the 8, which might surprise some people. But I just think the teams I've got coming in, the Raiders are on. The Raiders are playing the irony. Jack Whiten, since he's left, have been playing out of their skin. And you can see how much they love the guy. So he's obviously managed to explain to his team, boys, I think they're a better team than you guys, but I love you guys. And let's play and win. And they're doing it. So Jack Whiten, he's managed to galvanise the team, the irony, by leaving, agreeing to leave.
A team I think we can definitely put a line through for the premiership and maybe even not make the 8 if they keep playing like this. Panthers 48, Roosters 4. The Roosters have put in a couple of terrible performances. I didn't think they could look any worse than they did against the Cowboys last week, but they succeeded on Friday night.
Well, I think it shows the Panthers certainly still got what it takes. I tipped the Roosters to make the grand final. I don't know about that now, but I still think they'll make the 8. They have too many class players. They're too good a coach, and they are playing bad, but I think they're getting their bad patch out of the way now. I'm hoping that the Rabbitohs' bad patch doesn't arrive at about finals time, or just before finals time. The Roosters will rebuild. You can be certain about that.
The Panthers seem to have found the form that was eluding them at the start of the season, though.
They are. They're looking very ominous. So I think the Panthers, Rabbitohs, Raiders, the hottest teams in the comp. The Sharks aren't far off either. I think the Sharks will really do a number today.
Now, I sat and watched Saturday afternoon's game, Paul, the Rabbitohs and the West Tigers. I think the 20-0 scoreline's a little bit misleading because the West Tigers were far more competitive than I thought they would be. And actually, until well into the second half, it was 6-0.
Yeah, I had friends asking me in advance to bet and Rabbitohs by plenty. I warned each of them. I said, no, I think it's usually a danger match. That's the sort of game the last 5 or so years when we've been a good team, we've lost that fixture quite often. I think more than half the time. So the Tigers were right in it, and then the Rabbitohs class prevailed, but it certainly wasn't reflective of the match. And I think whether consciously or subconsciously, the Rabbitohs had taken their foot off the accelerator just a touch, because as we know, we can't keep up the pressure of the NRL for 26 rounds and finals. Unfortunately, teams just have to have games where they go through the motions in some ways, but the Rabbitohs found what they needed when they needed it.
Quick question for you about the West Tigers. Are they the best bottom team that you can remember at the moment?
Yeah, they're playing well. They've got some good players. If they start clicking in the forwards, they getting some performances from their forwards. The halves relatively settled. Keep in mind they lost their best player, Adam Dewey, so he's a big loss. But RP Carousel isn't far off at hooker, and it's all on Luke Brooks's shoulders. They've got Buller, the fullback at the back, who was touted to be an NBA star if he had stuck with basketball, but thankfully for NRL, they've managed to pluck this guy from the wilderness. This is the team that let James Tedesco go, Ryan Pappenhausen go, both pretty handy fullbacks. So it's good that hopefully the Tigers have found one they'll keep.
Well, they're only 3 games out of the 8. Now, not that I think that they'll make the 8, but I certainly think that by the end of the season, they won't be anywhere near the bottom.
And you'll have Tim Sheens transitioning across to Benji Marshall doing the coaching duties. You already see that in games. Benji takes over. So I think they'll improve. There's a lot more room for improvement there than the very sad teams around them at the bottom of the ladder. The Dragons, here's looking at you.
Yeah. The second game yesterday, Paul, Cowboys 42, Dragons 22, would have been a lot closer, perhaps, if Dragons hadn't had to play a sin bin. I looked at the scoreline. Sin binned in the 19th minute. Cowboys score tries in the 21st, 25th and 27th minute while that player's off the field. That's the end of the game.
You saw more Cowboys on fire than a John Wayne box set there in that period. It was just a Cowboy-a-thon. So that they were never going to come back from that. Particularly, there's a lot of trouble there at the Dragons. There's been some high-profile names floated to fix them. One of whom is Shane Fitzgibbon, who did the great job at South Sydney as a football manager. And then you've also got Jason Riles as being poached to be the next coach in a similar mould from the Storm setup to Craig Fitzgibbon. Shane Richardson, the Rabbitohs. They're floating him as a Phil Gould type role, football manager type role. He is a genius of a football manager. If they got him in and Jason Riles as good as what they say, the Dragons, there's hope for them, but this year's a write-off.
I had a look at the press conference after yesterday's game, and Ben Hunt, who was playing his 300th NRL game, was at the press conference. I don't think I would want to be going out with him last night. He didn't look too happy for the result for his 300th game.
No, and you wouldn't confuse Anthony Griffin with Eddie Murphy in Raw at the best of times. He's not the most excitable of men, and it would be brutal for any of us to have it known that you've been sacked or you've got to reapply for your job while they're excitedly trying to find other coaches. So he is a dead man walking, and I think he's held himself quite well, Griffin. It's not on him, and the players have got to lift. I don't think it's on him. He's too good a coach to have this on him.
What did you think of the news during the week that Michael Checker has been approached to perhaps take over at the Dragons?
Well, that's interesting. I know he's got interest in coaching in rugby league. Whether or not he'd be able to bring an outside set of skills in. You look at Tim Sheens, who hasn't been coaching for so long, and he didn't certainly start off well at the Tigers. I'd be more aiming for someone who's been in the rugby league system. That Jason Riles would be better, but Bellamy's going round again. So Jason Riles has a decision to make, whether he wants to wait another year or whether he wants to start immediately pretty much at the Dragons, who need him like last week. So it is an interesting left field selection, Checker.
Well, he did help Trent Robinson at the Roosters for some time.
Yes, so he's got a rugby league background and perhaps the skills are transferable. I don't know, but I wouldn't be going that direction. I think the Dragons need maybe a Shane Flanagan or someone who's actually got rugby league pedigree, more pedigree than Checker.
And the surprise team of the moment, the Canberra Raiders, as you said before, they've won 5 straight and they put the Eels to bed 26-18 on the back of
That was a very good win. And you could see how much it means to Ricky Stewart. And I think most importantly on the field, you can see how much it means to the players rallying around Jack White. And if there's any resentment that he's leaving for what he said was a better chance of winning a premiership, I didn't see it from the current Raiders team. They certainly look to be galvanised to me.
Yeah.
They stormed home last year, if you remember, to make the 8, so they're looking even better this year.
Brad Arthur wasn't too happy about the 10-3 penalty count. He said you can't win too many games with a penalty count like that.
No, he's right, but good teams find a way to overcome that. That might have been some hometown decisions, but I think the Eels have got to look inside themselves rather than pointing at referees.
I think, as you said, we can put a line through them for this season.
Yeah, I don't think they'll make the 8. I tip them to come 6, I think, and they're 14th. So I don't think they'll lift and make the 8.
All right, let's look at today's games. 13th place Knights playing the 9th place Titans. Titans can get back into the 8 with a win. This is usually the sort of game that the Titans end up muffing and losing.
Yes, well, I'd have to check the stats, but I have a feeling that the Knights seem to lift for the Mother's Day function, the ladies of the Hunter, the mums up there. I think the Knights will win this at home. They've got an incredibly good back line, and Ponga's back, and I think it might be Ponga's day to shine. You look at their back line of Lockie Miller's probably been one of the best fullbacks this year. Dominic Young is a try-scoring freak. He's off to the Roosters. Dane Gagai is very dependable. Bradman Best is a beast of a player. So that 4 first players you look at. And then they've got Ponga, who's a freak, as we know, and Hastings to help them guide them around. So I actually think the Knights should win this. They are slight favourites, and I think they'll win for the mums up there in the Hunter.
Is that a Dalligan special?
No, not quite the other one. I'd rather put my name and reputation on, please. Thank you.
And the final score?
22-10. I think they... Actually, no, that'll be a high-scoring game. I think 26-18 to the Knights.
All right, and the final game for the round is at 4:05 at Fortress Brookvale. Schooners Sea Eagles taking on the Sharks. Have we got any good news for Schooner?
No, sorry. I hate to say it. Unlucky he's not a mum. I'd be very surprised if he was. I don't think that Manly's any chance there. They're $2.50. Surprises me. I think the Sharks are specials, and that's all forgiveness to Schooner, but he knows I'll tell it how it is. The Sharks are rising, and I just think they've got too much class across the board to deal with Manly. There's still a question mark on Tommy Turbo. He's got to prove himself for Origin. Cooper Johns playing 5'8". I'm not too sure on that combination when you compare it to Matt Moreland and Nico Hines, who would have to be the form player of the competition at the moment. I think the Sharks will bounce back and win well. Sorry, Schooner.
Well, it could be a doubly bad day for Schooner, Paul, because Schooner's son barracks for the Sharks. Yeah,
well, that's the last thing you'd need. I grew up just down the road from there, and I know how parochial that can be, no doubt, even at a young age. So, you don't want a Shark attacking you in any sense. So I do feel for him, but at least he's been warned.
All right, and the final score?
I think it'll be 18-10. The Sharks pride themselves on the defence. I think they'll hold out the Eagles. Apologies, Schooner, this afternoon.
All right. So,
but I've got to say it's been a great season. The standard of league is as good as ever. You've got feel-good stories galore with the Raiders, and you've got Brisbane going well. That's great. 2 great rugby league cities. You got the Dolphins. That shows you how you do an expansion team properly. It's not a shot at the AFL. I'm simply saying, look how well it's worked. And if they were to make the 8, it would be amazing for rugby league. And it shows expansion can be done well.
And the Dolphins didn't need a new indoor stadium.
No, well, that's it. Or it's a great area up there, and they're going to grow as well. They're going to get some good players, and they might even poach a $1 million man for next year. The Dolphins. It's amazing what Wayne Bennett's done without signing any massive marquee players. He's built this team from spare parts, essentially. There are some stars there, but certainly no one of the calibre. You look at the Rabbitohs, when you've got Mitchell, you've got Cody Walker, you've got Damien Cook, you've got Cameron Murray, Campbell Graham. All of them are pushing $1 million. Wayne Bennett doesn't have that. So he deserves great credit for what he's done. with that team.
All right, we might finish on this one, Paul. These are the teams that are outside the 8 at the moment. West Tigers, Dragons, Bulldogs, Eels, Knights, Cowboys, Sea Eagles, Roosters and Titans. Which of those, if any, will break into the 8 and stay there?
We went the Dolphins, didn't we, I think? Well, they're 7th at the moment.
Dolphins are 7th, yeah.
Yeah, possibly possibly Manly if they get it all together, but I think leaning towards more the Knights. I just think the Titans are a touch overachieving at the moment. Sorry, Titans fans. They're good to watch. I just think that perhaps in the halves department they haven't quite got enough to challenge the other top 8 teams.
Well, and as I said before, Paul, today is the day that if the Titans are going to make the finals, they've got to win today, and this is a game that they usually drop.
Yeah, I just don't think they've got the consistency. They've got a good young team and they're getting some good players for next year, but I just don't think they're quite there yet. Top 8 standard. Top 8's a high standard in the NRL. No one sort of sneaks in.
All right, Paul, we'll leave it there. You can go and finish your other commitments that you've got for the day. Thanks very much for spending some time talking about NRL. Always a pleasure.